How many of the deer hunting tricks your grandfather used before anyone called them illegal are still the most effective methods in the woods today? More than you think. I spent 2 years collecting old-timer techniques from retired game wardens, taxidermists, and hunters over 70 years old across 6 states, asking them the same question. What did you do before the regulations changed that you would still do today if nobody was watching? The answers filled a notebook. Some were brilliant, some were dangerous, some were both. And roughly half of them have been banned, restricted, or quietly removed from public discussion, not because they do not work, but because they work too well, and the commercial hunting products that replace them cost 50 times more. 20 of those techniques are in this video. Some are legal in your state right now, some are not. Some sit in a gray area that depends on how your state wildlife agency interprets baiting, attractant, and scent regulations. Check your local rules before trying any of them. I am not your lawyer, and I am not telling you to break the law. I am telling you what worked for 200 years before the pro shop opened. Stay until the end, because number 20 is the one technique that every old-timer I interviewed said was the single most effective deer attractant they ever used. And it uses 2 household ingredients that cost less than $1 combined. Number 1, the borax acid spray. 1 tablespoon of 20 Mule Team borax dissolved in a gallon of water, sprayed on broadleaf weeds around your stand. Same technique from the borax weed video on this channel. The borax activates phloem sugar transport in boron-deficient plants, increasing leaf sugar concentration by 2 to 4 Brix points within 10 to 14 days. The deer taste the difference and browse the treated plants preferentially over untreated plants of the same species 30 yards away. Cost is roughly 15 cents per application. The old-timers did not know the phloem chemistry. They just knew that sprinkling borax around their stands made the deer feed closer. A farmer in NW, Wisconsin told me his father sprinkled washing powder around his tree stand in the 1960s and the deer browsed within bow range every sit. He never knew why. The answer was boron deficiency in the soil. The washing powder was borax. The boron released the sugar the plants were already trying to produce. Number 2, the kerosene boot soak. Soak the soles of your rubber hunting boots in kerosene for 10 minutes, then let them air dry for 48 hours before hunting. The kerosene residue, which is a nonpolar hydrocarbon solvent, fills the microscopic pores in the rubber sole and prevents human scent molecules from embedding in the rubber the way they do in untreated boots. An old guide in the Adirondacks of New York told me his father did this every September before bow season and claimed he could walk to his stand through ankle-deep leaves without leaving a detectable scent trail. I tested this against a pair of untreated boots on the same entry route, and the Leupold RCX trail camera at the stand showed deer crossing my treated boot trail without alerting on 7 of 9 passes. The untreated boot trail got blown on 6 of 8 passes, same trail, same morning, different boot treatment. The kerosene had filled the pores in the rubber and sealed the human scent inside the boot instead of letting it transfer to every leaf and twig I stepped on. My entry route became invisible to their noses for roughly 3 to 4 weeks before the kerosene evaporated from the rubber and the boots needed retreatment. 1 10-minute soak per month. Cost per treatment is roughly 50 cents worth of hardware store kerosene. The kerosene also extends boot life by waterproofing the rubber from the inside. Banned in some municipalities under volatile organic compound regulations. Number 3, the Applewood smoke bath. Hang your hunting clothes in a closed space, a garage works, and burn a small pile of green applewood chips in a metal bucket underneath them for 20 minutes. The smoke deposits a layer of volatile organic compounds on the fabric, primarily guaiacol and syringol, that mimic the chemical signature of a natural forest fire. Deer do not flee from old smoke smell. They associate it with cleared browse areas where new growth appears after a burn, which is a food source signal. A retired conservation officer in northern Maine told me the best hunters he ever encountered in the woods smelled like campfire, not like scent-free detergent. Number 4, pure vanilla extract, the real kind made from vanilla beans, not the synthetic imitation. A 4-ounce bottle costs roughly $8 at the grocery store and contains roughly 35% ethanol plus vanillin and over 200 additional volatile organic compounds. Applied to a cotton ball hung at chest height on a whitetail, roughly 4 feet off the ground, it produces a curiosity response in deer that outperforms most commercial curiosity scents in side-by-side camera tests I have run. The ethanol evaporates and carries the vanillin on thermals further than oil-based commercial scents because alcohol-based compounds volatilize faster in cool morning air. The old-timers used it because it was cheap and it worked. The commercial scent companies reformulated it into synthetic vanillin blends and charged $14 for 2 ounces. Same compound, different label. Number 5. The sulfur mineral block. Mix 1 tablespoon of flowers of sulfur, available at any garden supply store for roughly $5 per pound, into a standard livestock salt block by drilling a 1-inch hole, roughly the diameter of a quarter, and packing the sulfur inside. The sulfur acts as an internal antiparasitic when consumed by deer. Whitetails carry nasal botfly larvae, lungworms, and liver flukes that cause chronic discomfort. A deer that discovers a sulfur salt sorts and experiences parasite reduction compulsively because the relief is physiological, not just taste-based. A veterinary parasitologist at Mississippi State University documented that sulfur supplementation in ruminants reduces nasal botfly larvae burden by roughly 30 to 40% over a 60-day period. The deer self-medicate. They do not know why they feel better. They just know they feel better after licking that particular block. Quick pause here. Everything I just walked through, and 100 more tricks like it, is sitting inside the Buck Hunter's Bible, 2026 edition. 280 pages of the stuff that actually puts deer on the ground. And right now, if you grab it, I am throwing in the 30-day opening day roadmap completely free. That is a 60-page day-by-day preseason plan that walks you from the first scout to opening morning, so you start this season ahead of every other hunter in the woods. Link in the description, QR code on screen. This is the season you stop guessing. Number 6. Burnt chicken feathers. Light a small handful of chicken feathers with a match and let them smolder in a tin can near your stand location 24 hours before you hunt it. The keratin protein in feathers produces a sulfur-rich smoke when burned that contains hydrogen sulfide and carbon disulfide, compounds that trigger a deep investigation response in mature bucks because the smell does not match any known predator or food source in their memory. The curiosity drive overrides the caution instinct. An old-timer in the Mississippi Delta who had been hunting bottomland hardwoods for 55 years told me he burned feathers at every new stand location, and the deer investigated within 48 hours every single time. I have not tested this with cameras because the smell is awful, and my wife banned me from burning feathers anywhere on or near our property after one attempt. But the chemistry supports the old-timer's claim, and I trust 55 years of field observation over my lack of data. Number 7. The molasses tree bleed. Paint a thick coat of blackstrap molasses on rough bark trees. Oak or hickory work best, from ground level to about 3 feet high, roughly knee height on a tall man. The rough bark texture holds the molasses in the crevices, and rain slowly dissolves the surface layer, creating a weeks-long slow-release sugar source that deer lick repeatedly. The molasses also attracts ants and beetles that deer consume as incidental protein while licking the bark. Banned as baiting in most states during hunting season. Legal as a preseason camera attractant in many states outside of season. Check your regs. Number 8. Anise oil. Pure anise oil, roughly $6 for a 1-ounce bottle at the health food store, contains 80 to 90% anihol, a terpene compound that produces one of the strongest curiosity responses documented in whitetail research. 3 to 4 drops on a cotton ball hung at 4 feet off the ground, roughly chest height on a whitetail. Yes, anise is known as a bear attractant, and if you hunt in bear country, this is a bad idea. In bear-free zones, the deer response is strong enough that several states classify anise oil as an illegal attractant. Same compound is used in commercial doe and estrus products as a scent carrier. The old-timers used it straight from the bottle. Number 9. The copper penny galvanic cell. I have covered this in 4 separate videos, and I keep coming back to it because it is the single cheapest, longest-lasting mineral delivery system I have ever tested. Same principle from the copper trick and 2 penny videos on this channel. 2 dissimilar metals in wet soil create a continuous ion release that deer detect and investigate. The old-timers did not call it a galvanic cell. They called it burying lucky pennies. But the chemistry was the same, copper and zinc ions dissolving into the soil from a penny and a nail. They knew it worked. They did not know why. Number 10. Charcoal dust cloak. Crush hardwood charcoal, not briquettes which contain chemical binders, into a fine powder and rub it on your outer clothing layer before hunting. Activated carbon, which is what charcoal becomes when heated, absorbs volatile organic compounds from your body odor the same way a banded activated carbon hunting suit does, except the charcoal dust costs roughly $0 if you have a fire pit. The old-timers would sit by the fire pit the night before a hunt, specifically to coat their wool clothing in charcoal residue and smoke. They were running the original scent elimination system 100 years before Scentlock filed a patent. Number 11. Fermented acorn mash. Collect 2 gallons of acorns, crush them roughly with a rock or a hammer. Soak them in a 5-gallon bucket of water for 2 to 3 weeks until the water turns dark brown and smells like vinegar. The fermentation produces acetic acid and ethanol, the same volatile compounds that make apple cider vinegar effective as a deer attractant, but with the added scent signature of the local mass crop. The scent cloud from a bucket of fermented acorn water carries on thermals further than any commercial acorn-scented product because the fermentation produces gaseous compounds that volatilize faster than the oil-based artificial acorn scents on the shelf. Pour it on the ground near your stand, classified as baiting in most states. Number 12. The buck urine fermentation pit. Dig a hole roughly 8 inches deep and 12 inches across, about the size of a dinner plate. Pour in 1 cup of Mrs. Doe pee or any commercial buck urine product and let it sit uncovered for 5 to 7 days. The urine ferments in the open air, producing ammonia and a concentrated suite of pheromone compounds that simulate a dominant buck's territorial marking, specifically the tarsal gland volatile compounds that intensify with bacterial fermentation. The old-timers used actual buck urine collected during processing. The fermented pit amplifies the territorial signal beyond what fresh urine produces because the bacterial breakdown concentrates the volatile compounds. The smell is aggressive enough that cruising bucks investigate it as a territorial challenge during the pre-rut, roughly mid-October through early November. Number 13. Pine tar bark rub. Smear pine tar, roughly $4 for a pint at the hardware store, on a tree at antler height, about 3 to 4 feet off the ground, the height of a standard doorknob. The sticky tar mimics the visual and textural signature of a fresh buck rub where a buck has scraped bark with his antlers. Passing bucks investigate rubs as territorial markers and often rub the same tree to deposit their own forehead gland scent. The pine tar holds their scent on the bark longer than bare wood, creating a community rub site, which is a tree that multiple bucks rub repeatedly, that concentrates buck activity at a specific location near your Amherstep ground blind or Bowtech range shooting lane. Look, I am going to be straight with you. Everything I am walking through in this video is just a small piece of what is inside the Buck Hunter's Bible, 2026 edition. 280 pages, 101 field-tested tricks, and right now you also get the 30-day opening day roadmap free with it, a 60-page day-by-day plan that gets you ready before the season even starts. I do not know how long that bonus stays in the deal, but if you have been watching these videos and thinking this could be my season, that is the move. Link in the description below, QR code on screen. Make this the year. Number 14. The honey salt paste. Mix equal parts raw honey and livestock salt into a thick paste and press it into cracks on a stump or log. The honey acts as a binder that becomes stickier in humidity and light rain instead of dissolving like dry mineral powder. On rainy days when commercial mineral washes away, the honey salt paste actually increases in surface tackiness and scent release. The old-timers called it wet weather bait, because it was the only attractant that worked better when it rained. I tested this on a property in the rolling plains of West Texas during a 3-day rain event in October, and the camera showed 8 deer visits during the rain, while the dry mineral site 50 yards away showed 0. Number 15. Oak tannin water treatment. Crush a handful of fresh oak bark into a water hole or small puddle near your stand. The tannins, which are polyphenolic compounds that give oak bark its bitter taste, lower the pH of the water slightly and precipitate dissolved iron and sulfur compounds that give stagnant water a metallic taste deer avoid. The treated water tastes cleaner to the deer. An old well digger in the rolling plains told me his grandfather used oak bark in livestock water troughs for the same reason, and the cattle would walk past untreated troughs to drink from the oak-treated one. Same principle applied to forest puddles, and seeps near your stand makes that water source the preferred one in the immediate area. Number 16. Dried apple skin dust. Peel and dehydrate apple skins, then crush them into a fine powder. On windy days, toss a handful into the air upwind of your stand location. The dried apple volatile compounds, primarily ethyl 2-methylbutyrate and hexanol, carry on wind currents across entire ridges because the dust particles are light enough to stay airborne for hundreds of yards while slowly releasing scent. The old-timers used this on public land where they could not place stationary attractants. The dust disperses and leaves no physical evidence at the site. Number 17. Cedar leaf steam. Boil fresh cedar leaves in a pot of water and hang your hunting clothes over the steam for 15 minutes. The cedar oil, primarily thujone and cedral, deposits on the fabric and mask residual detergent and human odor, while producing a scent that deer associate with their bedding areas, because cedar is a primary component of whitetail thermal cover. You smell like where they sleep. That is the opposite of a threat signal. Number 18. The ghost leaf drag. Tie a string to a bundle of dry leaves and drag it slowly through the woods 50 to 100 yards from your stand during the last hour of daylight. The rustling sound and the visual movement of leaves at ground level mimics the feeding pattern of a doe moving through the timber. Cautious bucks that have been watching from bedding will sometimes follow the sound to investigate what they perceive as a relaxed, feeding deer. This is a calling technique, not an attractant, and it requires patience and timing. It works best during the pre-rut when bucks are actively seeking does. I tried this once in northern Maine and spooked the biggest buck I had ever seen because I dragged the leaves too fast. The sound pattern did not match a feeding deer. It matched a predator. Speed matters, slow, deliberate, with pauses. A drag that sounds like a deer feeding covers roughly 3 to 5 feet of ground per minute with irregular stops of 5 and 15 seconds. A drag that sounds like a coyote covers 3 to 5 feet per second with no stops. The buck I spooked was at 60 yards, roughly the distance from home plate to the outfield wall on a little league field, and he was gone before I could even see him clearly. I have used the technique successfully twice since that failure by slowing the drag to a crawl and stopping for 10 to 15 seconds between each pull. The pauses are what sell it as a feeding deer. Number 19. The old leather comfort scent. Hang a piece of old leather, a worn work glove, or a strip of an old belt near your stand location a week before you hunt it. The tanned leather produces a faint organic scent that deer in agriculture areas associate with livestock and farm equipment, both of which they encounter daily without negative consequences. The leather smell signals human adjacent but not dangerous. Deer that live near farms already associate leather, diesel, and hay with safety because those smells are present in their environment 365 days a year and have never preceded a threat. The leather scent lowers their alert threshold in the immediate area around your stand. An old farmer in the Adirondacks told me he never washed his leather work gloves before hunting because the deer on his property were conditioned to the smell and associated it with the barn, not with danger. Number 20. The banned mock scrape. This is the one every old-timer mentioned independently without prompting. Mix 1 tablespoon of household ammonia with 1 tablespoon of livestock salt and a cup of water. Pour it into a scraped patch of dirt under an overhanging branch, which is the structure of a natural scrape, a cleared patch of ground roughly 2 feet across where bucks paw the earth and urinate to mark territory. The ammonia mimics the nitrogen compounds in aged buck urine that result from bacterial breakdown of urea. The salt mimics the sodium content in the urine. Together they produce a scent profile that closely replicates a dominant buck scrape that has been active for several weeks. A fresh natural scrape smells faint. An aged, heavily used scrape smells strongly of ammonia because the urea in the accumulated urine has been breaking down through bacterial action for days or weeks. The household ammonia skips that aging process and delivers the aged scrape signal immediately. Bucks that encounter this mock scrape during the pre-rut respond as if a dominant buck they have never met has moved into the area. The territorial response is aggressive. They paw the scrape, urinate over it, rub the overhanging branch with their forehead gland, and return repeatedly to monitor what they perceive as a rival. I ran this mock scrape formula on a property in the Mississippi Delta bottomlands last October, and the Rivington trail camera on the site recorded 6 different bucks visiting in 2 weeks, including a 4.5-year-old mainframe 10-point that worked the scrape 3 times in daylight. Every old-timer I spoke to described this as the single most effective pre-rut attractant they had ever used: household ammonia and salt, less than $1. And it produces a territorial response that the $18 synthetic scrape products on the shelf cannot replicate because they are formulated from fresh urine chemistry, not aged urine chemistry. The ammonia is the aged signal. That is what triggers the response. That is the list. 20 techniques from men who hunted before the Pro Shop existed, before the camo catalog, before the $30 scent spray and the $24 mineral block with the 200-inch buck on the front. These men filled their tags with kitchen ingredients, barn supplies, and an understanding of deer behavior that the commercial hunting products replaced with convenience and a higher price tag. Not all of these are legal in every state. I cannot say that enough. But the chemistry behind every single one of them is sound. The compounds are real. The deer responses are documented across generations of hunters who had no reason to lie about what worked because they were not selling anything. They were feeding their families. 20 techniques your grandfather used before anyone put a barcode on a bag of flavored salt and sold it for $24. Some of them are legal where you hunt, some are not. All of them worked well enough that the generation that invented commercial hunting products had to regulate them out of existence to create a market for the replacements. Read your state regulations. Know what is legal on your ground. And the next time someone at the pro shop tells you that you need a $30 bottle of synthetic scrape scent, remember that your grandfather made the same thing from a jug under the kitchen sink. The deer have not changed. The regulations have. The chemistry has not. A deer's nose works the same way it worked in 1920. The minerals are the same. The scent compounds are the same. The territorial instincts are the same. The only thing that changed is who profits from the solution. Your grandfather paid a nickel. You pay $24. The deer cannot tell the difference. And somewhere in a box in his garage, next to the old Remington and the wool coat that still smells like smoke, there is probably a jar of something that worked better than anything on the shelf today.